At Grandma's birthday banquet, she asked me to choose someone for an arranged marriage. I looked across the hall and saw Ethan, impeccably dressed as always, his posture perfect, his presence cold and unreachable, as if nothing in the world could stir him. Then my eyes shifted to Noah, who was crouched down, arguing with a small boy over a lollipop. I raised my hand and pointed. Him, I said, I choose him. When I first walked into the banquet hall, Ethan was the first person I noticed. He stood tall and straight, like a mountain wrapped in ice. My gaze was pulled to him before I could stop it. He saw me looking but turned away, his indifference exactly the same as in my previous life. I quickly averted my eyes and made my way to the farthest corner from him. I was afraid if I lingered, the flood of painful memories would drown me. As the guests raised their glasses and offered wishes of longevity and good health, Grandma was wheeled out from her room. A gentle smile on her face, Mason parted the crowd, searching for me. When he spotted me, he waved me over. I knelt beside her wheelchair, quietly waiting for her to speak. All the Bennett boys around your age are here today, Grandma said softly, her eyes scanning the room. See if there is anyone you like. She motioned toward Ethan and Noah. I glanced once more at Ethan. His cold, commanding presence made him seem untouchable. Then I looked at Noah again. He was still caught up in a playful spat with the little boy, and that was when I made my choice. Him, I said, I choose him. In my previous life, I had chosen Ethan. I had spent years trying to win his heart, even after we married, but until the day I died, he never loved me. He believed I had forced the marriage on him, and he treated me with more distance than he did his own employees. I had foolishly thought that time and patience would soften him. Instead, he brought another woman home to flaunt in front of me. When I finally begged for a divorce, he refused. Even in death, he tied our fates together, dragging me into a bitter, endless torment. Now that I had a second chance, I would never live like that again. When I pointed to Noah, the entire hall fell into stunned silence. Ethan, who had seemed disinterested earlier, suddenly lifted his head to look at me. Just moments before, his eyes had been closed, as though he could not be bothered. How could he have noticed? Somewhere in the crowd, someone tried to whisper a comment, but they were immediately hushed. The old lady is still here, someone reminded. The shock was understandable. For half a year now, I had been relentlessly chasing Ethan. I had delivered meals to his office 3 times a day. On holidays and weekends, I waited outside his company building, hoping for just a glance. My efforts had earned me a reputation as his most persistent admirer, yet Ethan had never once shared a meal with me, let alone agreed to a date. Everyone in both the Carter and Bennett families knew about my feelings. They had just kept the truth from Grandma, afraid that she would try to force an engagement, and if that happened, Ethan, stubborn and proud, would surely rebel. And things would only get worse. Now, Grandma had brought up the idea of marriage herself. Her health was failing, and she wanted to fulfill the engagement that Grandfather had arranged before he passed. As the only granddaughter of the Carter family, Grandma cherished me dearly and hoped to see me settled with someone reliable. The Bennetts, out of respect for an old family debt, had left the matter entirely in our hands. I turned to Noah and asked quietly, "Do you agree?" Noah, who had always seemed to understand my affection for Ethan, stood frozen, stunned by my words. I felt my heart tighten. What if he rejected me? My gaze began to drift back toward Ethan. Then I caught myself. No, that was no longer an option. I debated whether to pull Noah aside and explain things, but before I could move, he finally spoke. "You chose me?" he asked, eyes wide in disbelief, as he turned to face me. The motion sent the lollipop flying out of the little boy's hand and straight into his own mouth. The child immediately burst into tears. In a panic, Noah clumsily tried to muffle the crying with his hand. His stance awkward and embarrassed, a quiet, mocking laugh broke the silence. All eyes turned toward Ethan. He smirked, cold and scornful, his gaze fixed on Noah. The air in the room grew tense and heavy. I ignored Ethan completely. He was already in control of half the Bennett family's empire, used to holding power, used to making others bend to his will, but not me. Not anymore. I looked back at Noah and asked again, "Do you agree?" I stared at him, my voice steady. Though my hands were damp with sweat, I had no idea what he would say. In my previous life, I had paid him so little attention, and now, every second of silence made my heart race faster. After a long moment, Noah nodded. Relief rushed through me. He had agreed. What a kind person. I would have to thank him properly later. He must have seen how much I risked by making that choice and did not want to embarrass me in front of everyone. We had barely spoken before today. I had always been focused on someone else. Most people in his position would have turned me down, but I had been reborn, and I knew what was coming. I knew that Grandma would not live much longer. If Noah had refused me, I would not have found anyone else in time to give her peace of mind. In my last life, when I chose Ethan, I thought I was choosing love, but after I made that decision, he pulled me aside in private. I only agreed because of Grandma. He told me, do not overthink it. He made sure I understood. There was no love, no hope, only obligation. But this time, I had chosen differently, and maybe, just maybe, I would finally be free. When Grandma passed away, she held my hand in hers, and Ethan's, and gently urged us to take care of each other. After the funeral, Ethan's parents began pushing for our wedding. I hesitated. I felt we had not truly spent enough time together, and I worried he might feel pressured into it. But before I could voice any concerns, Ethan agreed on the spot. He told me not to play coy, saying he would never go against Grandma's final wish. Not long after that, we got married. There was no ceremony, no celebration, just the legal paperwork. Our relationship did not change much. Aside from moving into the same house, everything stayed the same. For 5 years, Ethan remained distant and cold. Unless we were attending a social event where he needed me by his side, he rarely spoke to me. Most days, it felt like I was invisible. One evening, I had to work late. A colleague kindly offered to drive me home since it was on his way. As fate would have it, Ethan returned just as we pulled up. Perhaps something snapped in him when he saw me getting out of that car, because he rushed over and punched the poor man without a word. That night, we had our first real argument. It was loud and painful, the kind of fight that leaves you breathless. After that, he stopped coming home altogether. I was angry, hurt, and too proud to try and fix things. We entered a long, bitter silence, a cold war with no end in sight. Then one day, he brought another woman home. He held her close, right in front of me, as if daring me to react. That was the final blow. I asked for a divorce, but he refused, and so we remained locked in a cycle of quiet misery, hurting each other again and again until the day I died. All right, Grandma's cheerful voice pulled me out of those thoughts. She laughed, a sound I had not heard in so long. Ever since her illness had confined her to bed 6 months ago, she had rarely smiled, but today, she was full of life. She held my hand, shared a few words of wisdom, and then turned to chat with her old friends. When she grew tired, the attendants gently wheeled her back to her room to rest. Left alone, I glanced around the room and spotted Noah. I walked over to him and gently pulled him aside. "Thank you for helping me," I said softly. "Please don't feel pressured. Once Grandma passes peacefully, we can." Before I could finish, Noah raised his hand and said, "Stay here, don't move, wait for me." Then he took off, heading straight for the neighboring Bennett estate. Less than 5 minutes later, he came back, carrying a large box. He opened it and pulled out a stack of certificates. "I majored in computer science," Noah began. "These are my awards from college competitions." He looked at me directly, his voice steady but open. "I know I've always seemed a little easygoing, but I am not stupid. I know how to code, I know how to build software. I am not going to end up lost just because my family stops helping me." As he spoke, he continued pulling things out of the box: a property deed, 2 sets of car keys, and a bank card. "This is what I've earned developing games with some friends," he said. "The apartment is a 2-bedroom downtown, nothing fancy, but the location is excellent. The cars, there are 2, if there's one you like, you are welcome to use it." Noah handed me the bank card. "There's about $1 million in the account now, not much, but it's yours if you need it. I'll make more, a lot more, so do not worry." Then, as if afraid I might say no, he quickly pushed the entire box into my arms. "Don't get the wrong idea," he added, speaking quickly. "You chose me, right, even if we are just trying this out, just testing things to see if we are a good match. And even if you don't choose me in the end, I want to be honest, you don't have to be the same with me. I am not expecting that. This is just who I am." He waved his hands nervously, almost as if he thought I might misunderstand his intentions. "I did not think you would agree," I said softly, my eyes on the box in my arms. My heart felt full of tangled emotions. "I'm happy," Noah said simply, his gaze steady and sincere. "You chose me. That alone makes me happy. So you do not need to feel guilty or thank me, and you definitely do not need to break things off once your grandmother is gone." I looked up and met his eyes. We stood quietly for a moment, just holding each other's gaze. Then, all of a sudden, he turned and bolted. "Noah," I called out, still holding the heavy box. He waved without looking back. "I'm not good at making girls happy," he called, "but take it. If you decide you don't want to be with me later, we'll deal with it then." And just like that, he disappeared out the door. I stood there, stunned. He was so thoughtful, so generous, offering everything he had for a relationship that was barely beginning. Did it not scare him? Did he not worry someone might take advantage of him and drain everything he had? The weight of the box in my arms suddenly felt enormous. I looked down at it, still unsure of what to do. When I felt a shadow fall over me, I looked up and found myself face to face with Ethan. His eyes were cold, his tone mocking, playing hard to get. "Is it fun for you?" I blinked, startled, trying to make sense of his words. "You think choosing Noah is going to make me jealous?" Ethan sneered, a sarcastic smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Last night, you braved the rain just to bring me dinner. You left a note with Ted, told him to take care of me. Even gave him an umbrella and cold medicine, just in case." His eyes narrowed. "And now this morning, you suddenly pick someone else. Aside from trying to get back at me for shutting you out of my office last night, what other reason could you possibly have?" He stepped closer. "You finally realized that constantly chasing me wasn't working, so now you're trying to get my attention by doing the opposite. Reverse psychology. Is that it?" His harsh words hit me like a cold slap. And for a brief moment, memories from my past life flooded back. Back then, I had been hopelessly infatuated with Ethan. I chased after him with everything I had, throwing away my pride again and again, no matter how coldly he treated me in front of others. I clung to the fragile hope that one day he would return my feelings, so I was not surprised he found it hard to believe that I had suddenly chosen Noah. What I did not expect was the intensity of his reaction. I looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "You never liked me to begin with. Shouldn't you be glad I've finally stopped bothering you?" Ethan hesitated for just a second. His gaze wavered, but then he quickly recovered, his expression hardening once more. "Don't flatter yourself," Ethan said sharply. "Do you think I am even slightly upset because I liked you? Stop being so delusional. I just cannot accept losing to someone like him, a wife from that kind of family." His voice was heavy with disdain, and his meaning was clear. His words did not surprise me. Ethan and Noah were both members of the Bennett family, but Ethan was the eldest grandson of the main branch. His parents were prominent figures, respected in both politics and business. They were powerful, admired, and used to commanding any room they entered. Noah's father, on the other hand, stayed out of family affairs entirely. He had chosen to teach at a top university instead of chasing status. While Noah's mother had been an actress, an occupation quietly looked down upon by the family's elite circles, from an early age, Ethan had shown extraordinary talent. With his photographic memory and sharp intellect, he had been the pride of the family. Noah had always needed to work twice as hard just to be acknowledged, and to make things worse, he had chosen a completely different path. Instead of entering the family business, he pursued a career in programming and game development. The elders viewed his choice as reckless and rebellious. Eventually, they gave up on him altogether, excluding him from family meetings and responsibilities. He was left on his own. The box I held in my arms suddenly felt heavier, my hands began to ache. But I stood firm. Ethan's condescending words echoed in my mind, making the weight press even harder on my shoulders. I did not want to go in circles with Ethan any longer. It had come to this, and I needed to make things clear once and for all. I looked him in the eye and said, "Ethan, I do not love you anymore." My choice to walk away and be with Noah has nothing to do with you. You can rest easy. You do not like me, and you hate him. That works out perfectly. From now on, let us go our separate ways. We will have nothing more to do with each other." With that, I turned and walked toward the door, but suddenly, Ethan grabbed my wrist. "What are you doing?" I snapped, twisting my arm, trying to pull free, but his grip was firm. "You say you do not like me anymore?" Ethan asked. His voice quiet but cold. Under the dim hallway light, his eyes looked darker than usual, like the surface of a frozen lake in winter. "Let go of me," I demanded, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. Instead of releasing me, he tightened his hold. "I do not believe you," he said, his tone as sharp as ice. I stood still for a moment, startled. A memory surfaced. Once, I had thrown away a necklace, a small thing I no longer wanted. I had tossed it into a pond without much thought. That night, I fell ill with a high fever. Later, I heard that Ethan had gone into the icy water to retrieve it. There were whispers that it had been a gift from a relative, and he believed my illness had been brought on by the loss. In the middle of winter, he had jumped into the freezing pond and nearly died. He spent 3 days with a fever, hovering at the edge of consciousness. Now he said quietly, "You were someone I once risked my life for. How can you say you stopped loving me?" Just like that, without any warning. So he had known about the necklace all along. I had worked so hard to keep it from him, afraid he would feel burdened by the gesture. But he had known everything. A bitter laugh rose silently in my chest. How ridiculous I had been in my past life. I had given him my whole heart, and he had always known, but he had never cared. To Ethan, our marriage had always been a burden, something he had been forced into. He blamed me for it. His coldness, his distance, had lasted an entire lifetime. The love I had poured into that marriage had meant nothing to him. I repeated, "Let go," but his fingers only dug in deeper. Pain shot up my arm, and I could not help but cry out. That seemed to finally bring him back to his senses. He loosened his grip just enough, and I yanked my hand free and rushed inside, slamming the door behind me. I hurried up the stairs to the 3rd floor, straight into my bedroom, making sure no one saw my face. The moment I closed the door behind me, all the strength drained from my body. I sank to the floor, my back pressed against the wood. In my past life, at the very end, I could not stop myself from feeling resentment. Ethan had always had a choice. He did not have to marry me. He did not have to say yes to the arrangement, not even after Grandma passed away, but he did marry me, and then he blamed me for everything. That one decision had dragged both of us into years of unhappiness. He said it was for Grandma, that it was her last wish. Maybe that was true, but none of it would have happened if I had not chosen him that night at the banquet. I could not deny it. The suffering I had endured in my past life came from the choices I had made myself. A sudden thud pulled me out of my thoughts. The box Noah had given me had tipped over, and the contents, bank card, property deed, and car keys, scattered across the floor. I bent down slowly to pick them up, each item a stark reminder that those memories belonged to another life. I gently patted my cheeks, trying to clear my mind and refocus. This life would be different. I would not make the same mistakes again. The next morning, I was jolted awake by one of Grandma's attendants. She urged me to wash up and come downstairs quickly, thinking something urgent had happened. I hurried down, only to find Noah waiting in the living room. He had traded last night's casual banquet t-shirt for a crisp black suit. The formal attire made him look even more composed than usual. "Good morning," Noah said politely. "Where's Grandma?" I gave him a slight nod in greeting and looked around. She was not in sight. Noah spoke again, his voice soft. "She asked Mrs. Jang to take her to the back garden for some fresh air." Then, his face flushed pink as he added, eyes cast downward, "She also said, she wants us to move in together." As he spoke, his ears turned red, as though the words themselves embarrassed him to the point of pain. His awkwardness brought back memories. In my previous life, after I had chosen Ethan as my partner, Grandma had given us a house the very next day. She insisted we move in together to build our bond. I looked at Noah and asked gently, "You don't want to?" His head shot up immediately. "I do," he said quickly. Our eyes met for just a second before he looked away again, his face now fully crimson. There was a quiet innocence in him. A shyness that made me feel a sudden pang of guilt. After everything I had gone through, after the heartbreak and failure of a cold marriage, I had stopped hoping for love. This arrangement with Noah, for me, was just to ease Grandma's mind, but for him, he had been pulled into this because of my choice. If he had no feelings for me, if he held no hopes for what this could become, then perhaps it would have been easier, but now, I was not so sure. While Noah and I were talking, I had not noticed that the house staff had already packed my things. Mrs. Jang returned from the garden at some point and quietly handed me a small set of keys. "The old lady has already transferred the house to your name," she said. "It's the nicest one near your workplace. She chose it herself." In my past life, I had been thrilled at the thought of moving in with Ethan. I had accepted Grandma's arrangement without hesitation. But now, knowing she had only a few days left, all I wanted was to stay close to her. Mrs. Jang must have sensed my hesitation. She placed a gentle hand on my arm and spoke in a low voice. "She just asked for a glass of water. She isn't doing well and doesn't want you to see her in this state. She has lived a long life and seen everything she needed to see. She has no regrets." She paused and continued softly. "After your grandfather passed, she felt like the meaning in her life had disappeared. But when your parents had their accident, and you were left all alone, she found the strength to carry on. Even with the company on her shoulders and the loss of her closest companion, she pushed through all these years. As long as you are happy, she will leave this world in peace." I knew it too. Everyone in the house could see how frail Grandma had become. She spent most of her day asleep now, and none of us could be sure how many more mornings she would wake to see. That was why she had chosen to leave the hospital and return home, to spend her final days in the place that held all her memories. I nodded silently. The weight in my chest grew heavier. Later, the driver dropped Noah and me off at the house Grandma had arranged for us. A cool autumn breeze greeted us as we stepped out, carrying the soft, sweet scent of osmanthus flowers. The smell brought me back, stirring something deep in my memory. Noah stepped out first, then walked around to open the car door for me. I looked up at the house. Its outline was etched into my bones from a lifetime ago. Familiar, comforting, painful, but as I prepared to step out of the car, it felt like my foot was weighed down by 1,000 pounds. In my past life, Ethan and I had only lived in this house for a few days before Grandma passed. After the wedding, I moved into Ethan's home, and this house remained empty. Later, when our marriage turned cold, and Ethan brought another woman into our home, I moved back here alone. He followed me. He said he had to keep an eye on me, in case I brought another man into Grandma's house and embarrassed him. He used this place, this house Grandma had given me as a blessing, as a weapon to control me. "You forced me into this marriage," he had said once, "so you will suffer through it with me for the rest of your life." I had no way to keep Ethan from moving in. But this house was Grandma's gift to me, a symbol of her hope that I would live a joyful life, and that hope, no matter what happened next, I intended to protect. I did not want a third person stepping into our lives. I had drawn a clear boundary, and to my surprise, Ethan did not argue. He accepted it without a word. From that moment on, we slipped back into the way things had been early in our marriage. Cold, quiet, and distant, he buried himself in work every day, barely coming home. While I remained in that house, trying to build a sense of peace around myself, I began focusing on my own life. I no longer tried to warm Ethan's icy silence with my presence. I stopped preparing meals for him, stopped worrying about whether he was too hot or too cold. I even adjusted my schedule to avoid being home when he was, unless it was absolutely necessary. We barely saw each other. That was how we lived for 2 years, like strangers under one roof, distant, indifferent, and silent. Then one day, I was sent on a business trip to a remote mountain region. A sudden earthquake struck and brought my short, quietly painful life to an abrupt end. Now, sitting in front of that same house again, I could feel every memory weighing down on me. So much sadness lingered here. I could not bring myself to even open the car door. "Noah," I heard someone say. I looked up to see him watching me with concern. He must have noticed that I had not moved at all. When his eyes met mine, his brows furrowed. "You do not look well," Noah said gently. "Are you feeling sick?" He reached toward me, Hesitating halfway as though unsure if he should touch me, a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. "I am fine," I said softly, steadying his hand with mine and looking him in the eye. "I remember you mentioned you have another house nearby, right?" I asked. Would it be all right if I stayed there instead? The words came out before I had time to stop them, as soon as I said it. I regretted it. If I stayed at another property owned by the Sue family, Grandma would hear about it in no time. But I quickly added, it would just be for a few days. I am allergic to osmanthus blossoms, and the scent here is too strong. Once I find a place that suits me, I will move. Noah froze for a second. Caught off guard. Allergic to osmanthus, he repeated. That is my fault. I had no idea. He looked me over quickly, eyes scanning my face, neck, and hands as though searching for a rash. Do you feel itchy, short of breath? Is your throat tight? He asked urgently. Severe allergies can be dangerous. He reached for his phone, ready to call for help. I stopped him with a calm smile. His worry lightened the heaviness inside me more than I expected. It is not your fault, I said gently. You did not know, and it has not been that long, so I am fine for now. But if I stay too long, who knows? Noah relaxed just slightly, then shut the car door and quickly moved to the other side. He climbed in, gave the driver an address, and before long, we arrived at his apartment building. The driver helped us carry our bags upstairs. When we reached the door, I stood quietly, waiting for Noah to unlock it, but he did not move. He looked awkward and lowered his head. The key, Noah said, almost shyly, is in the box I gave you last night. There is only one. He lifted his hand slightly as if to emphasize the point. Just one key. I gave it to you. I blinked. You gave it to me. I repeated. I was too excited. I guess I did not think it through, Noah admitted, sounding embarrassed. I live alone. I never made a spare. Looking at his awkward expression, I could not help but tease him a little. What would you have done if I had not come today? I asked with a grin. How are you planning to get into your own place without a key? If I gave the key to you, then it is yours now, Noah replied seriously. I can always stay at my office. I shook my head, half laughing. He was the kind of person con artists dream of, completely sincere and completely trusting. I opened my suitcase, found the little box, pulled out the key, and unlocked the door, but the moment it opened, I froze. The entire space was pink, every inch of it. You like this? I asked, turning to him slowly. Noah opened his mouth as if to explain but stopped when our eyes met. After a moment, he gave a small nod. Maybe the way I looked at him made him uneasy, because he quickly looked away. Do not be shy, I said, trying to reassure him. There is nothing wrong with liking pink. Who says boys cannot like pink? Noah did not answer. He just lowered his head even more, his ears and cheeks glowing with embarrassment. I decided to stop teasing him and stepped into the apartment. Once inside, the pinkness hit me even harder than before. From the entryway, I had only seen the hallway and part of the living room. But now that I was standing in the center of the home, I could see everything. Pink doors, pink kitchen cabinets, even a pink-tiled bathroom. This was not just someone who liked pink, this was someone who loved it, deeply. Luckily for him, I liked pink too. For someone like me, this place was heaven. Pink walls, pink cushions, pink sofa, even pink floors. It was a world dipped in softness and sweetness. In my previous life, I had always loved the color pink. Once, I even thought about adding pink accents to the cold, monochrome home that Ethan and I shared, something to warm up the black, white, and gray, but Ethan had said pink was childish. He would not even let me wear pink dresses to formal events. Over time, I buried my preferences, tailoring everything, what I ate, what I wore, what I used, to suit his tastes. Back then, I did not think I was wrong. I loved him, and I believed that making him happy was the same as being happy myself. But now, standing in a home decorated exactly the way I liked, I realized how much joy there was in simply pleasing myself. There were 2 bedrooms in this house. I instinctively rolled my suitcase toward the guest room, but Noah stepped in front of me. This is my room, he said gently. You can take the guest room. I looked at him in surprise. You don't mind? Noah gave a small nod. I'm busy with work. I'm not here often. The guest room is just fine. It felt odd, having the homeowner offer to stay in the smaller room, but he did not seem to want to discuss it further, and I was not the type to push. I simply let it go and began unpacking. Once I finished, I realized how hungry I was. I had skipped breakfast and been busy moving all morning, now that things had settled. The emptiness in my stomach hit me all at once. I was about to order delivery when the smell of scallion pancakes floated through the air. Curious, I followed the scent into the kitchen and found Noah wearing an apron, flipping scallion pancakes in the skillet. A pot of milk was warming on the stove beside him. "You didn't have breakfast, and the fridge didn't have much," he said as he glanced over his shoulder. "This should tide you over for now. Delivery food is not very clean anyway. For lunch, I'll take you to a nearby place I like." Watching him from the doorway, I suddenly felt a lump rise in my throat. This scene, so simple, so warm, was something I had long dreamed about. After my parents passed away, I had always longed for a comforting home of my own, but after marrying Ethan, shared meals became a rare occasion. I was the one who brought food to him, always reminding him to eat, but he never once asked if I had eaten. I used to think I could live without being cared for, but now, in this quiet kitchen, the feeling of being looked after touched something deep in me. When Noah turned around with the food, I quickly wiped my eyes and sat at the dining table before he could notice. He placed the pancakes and milk in front of me and sat nearby, watching as I began to eat. "If there's anything about the house you don't like, feel free to change it," he said, his voice earnest. "I don't mind." "I'm only staying for a few days," I replied, chewing slowly. "There's no need." But Noah's expression was so sincere, as though he was genuinely excited about sharing this space. I did not want to dim his spirit, so I said nothing more. Later, as promised, Noah took me to a small, private restaurant he liked. The place was quiet and tucked away, with a cozy atmosphere, but just as we stepped inside, someone called out my name. It was Ted, Ethan's assistant. The moment Ted saw me, his face lit up. As though he had just found the answer to all his problems, he rushed over. "Miss Sue, what a coincidence. This is perfect timing," he said. "You didn't bring breakfast or lunch to Mr. Carter today. He hasn't eaten anything." Ted looked genuinely anxious. I tried to order for him, but he refused everything. I asked my team for help, and someone mentioned this restaurant. They said Ethan might like it, so I came over. "You know his tastes better than anyone. Can you help me choose a few dishes to take back? If the food is from you, he might eat." I knew Ethan would not touch anything I picked, but I also did not want to be cold to Ted. In my previous life, when others at Ethan's company mocked me behind my back, Ted had always been kind. He once shared with me that he had a younger sister who had also chased someone she loved. He had tried to stop her, thinking it was foolish, but she passed away from illness before she could fulfill that love. His biggest regret was holding her back. "Life is short," Ted had told me back then, "about 30,000 days if we are lucky. If you want something, go after it with your whole heart." His words had stayed with me, but after living a lifetime with someone who never loved me, I had learned the hard way that not everything was worth chasing. Some things, no matter how much effort you give, just are not meant to be. "You're not like the others," Ted said now. "Ethan never let you in. But he ate every single meal you brought him. He never threw any of it away. If you keep trying, maybe you'll succeed." He looked at me with hope, completely unaware that my life had already taken another turn. He still thought I was just heartbroken and needed encouragement. "That won't be necessary," I said quietly, then gently took Noah's arm and walked with him to a private dining room nearby. Ted stood frozen in place, watching us go, as though trying to understand what had just happened. Halfway through lunch, my phone buzzed with a message. I opened it. It was from Ethan. "You went out to lunch with Noah," I typed back calmly. "That has nothing to do with you." A second message came almost immediately. "You did this on purpose. You made sure Ted saw it. You just want my attention, don't you?" I did not bother to read the rest. I blocked and deleted his number without hesitation. Noah looked up just as he set a plate of carefully peeled shrimp in front of me. "Who was that?" he asked gently. "No one," I replied quietly, turning my phone face down on the table. Then I picked up my chopsticks, a clear signal that the conversation was over. Noah did not press further, but I noticed that he remained unusually quiet for the rest of the meal. His eyes kept drifting. And he barely touched his food. Concerned, I asked, "Are you feeling all right?" Noah shook his head, as if brushing the thought away. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, he smiled and said, "After lunch. Why don't we go to the amusement park?" I gently declined. "I was actually planning to check in on Grandma today," I said. "She's been on my mind." "I'll come with you," Noah offered immediately, his eyes filled with hope. In the end, I agreed. I knew Grandma would be happier seeing the two of us together than if I went alone. When we arrived at the Sue family home, Grandma was resting. We decided not to disturb her. Instead, we returned to Noah's house for the evening. The next day was Monday. I headed off to work, and Noah went to his company. Unlike Noah, who came from a prominent business family, I had never been interested in that world. After graduate school, I took a position at a research institute. It was a steady 9-to-5 job with regular holidays. The workload was light. My boss was kind, and my colleagues were easy to get along with. In both this life and the last, I found peace in the simplicity of work. I never felt overwhelmed or dissatisfied. Life moved along quietly, just as it had before, only now, the home I returned to was Noah's, and the person who greeted me each day was not Ethan, but Noah. That was a change I welcomed. There was no longer a heavy silence hanging over the house, no need to constantly tiptoe around someone's mood. During this time, I visited Grandma a few more times. Noah always came with me. He seemed to understand, without me saying a word, just how important those visits were. Thursday came quickly. It was the day I knew, deep down, would be Grandma's last. That afternoon, I received a tearful call from Mrs. Jang. Her voice trembled as she told me that Grandma's condition had worsened and that she wanted to see Noah and me one last time. I called Noah right away. He told me not to worry and came to pick me up. Together, we rushed to the family home and to Grandma's bedside. Just like in my past life, Grandma took my hand and placed it in Noah's. Her voice was faint but full of warmth as she asked us to take care of each other. Under her tender gaze, I nodded. Tightening my grip on Noah's hand, he squeezed back gently, his touch steady and reassuring. But this time, I knew I could not honor her final wish. I would disappoint her. In my heart, I silently promised that when I saw her again in the afterlife, I would kneel before her and ask for her forgiveness. In my previous life, Ethan and I had spent decades trapped in a painful relationship because of this one final promise. I did not want Noah to go through the same fate. He deserved someone who could love him without hesitation, someone who could walk through life beside him with joy, not someone who stayed only out of obligation, because of Grandma's long illness. The funeral had already been arranged in advance. It was a simple service and passed quickly. Ethan did not attend. His parents explained that he was on a business trip overseas and that they did not want to disturb him or risk complications while he was away. They decided to inform him about Grandma's passing after he returned. In my past life, on this very day, Ethan had also been scheduled to travel, but I had begged him to stay. I had pulled him into my grief and confusion. This time, I did not interfere. Without my presence, our lives remained like parallel lines, close but never truly intersecting. In truth, Noah and I were not so different. We too were parallel lines, each walking our own path. After the funeral, I planned to move out of Noah's home. Over the past week, I had quietly searched for a new place and had already found one. I had not told him yet. I wanted to leave gently, but on the way back from the funeral, a wave of dizziness came over me, and I fainted. I briefly regained consciousness to the sound of Noah's voice. Tight with panic, I felt the car make a sudden sharp turn as he told the driver to head straight to the hospital. I did not want to go. The hospital reminded me too much of loss. The smell of disinfectant, the sterile halls. It brought back memories of losing my parents. I hated it, so Noah took me back to his house instead. After that, everything went dark again. When I finally became aware of my surroundings, my mind was cloudy. I saw Noah sitting beside me, gently pressing a cool towel to my forehead. "Don't worry," Noah whispered softly, "you're going to be all right. The doctor came by already. He said you're just exhausted, that you've been under too much stress and not sleeping enough. You fainted, but it's nothing serious, you just need rest." His voice was calm and reassuring. I let myself drift off again. the weight of everything pulling me back into sleep. The next time I woke up, my throat was painfully dry. I tried to open my eyes, but they felt heavy, my limbs would not move. Water, I whispered, barely audible. Almost instantly, a cup of warm water was brought to my lips. From that moment on, I drifted in and out of sleep. Each time I opened my eyes, even just a little, Noah was there. Sometimes he was cooling my forehead, sometimes he was sitting quietly, working on his laptop, other times, he was simply watching over me. Never once did he leave. His attentiveness was remarkable. Every time I moved, even slightly, he noticed right away. At first, I assumed he was just pretending to work on his laptop, offering a performance of productivity while keeping an eye on me. But as I watched the programs on his screen become increasingly complex and detailed, I realized he was genuinely working. His concentration, paired with the quiet care he showed, made me smile despite how awful I felt. That night marked the first time in years that I had been truly ill, and the first time I felt so deeply cared for. Ironically, the person looking after me was Noah, someone who had been a stranger to me not long ago. Our arrangement had been practical, not emotional, and yet, in those quiet hours, something shifted. When I started to feel better, I knew I could not simply brush it off. I had to thank him sincerely. I had hoped I would recover by the next morning. But my condition wavered for 3 more days. During that time, Noah helped me request medical leave and stayed by my side the entire time. When he was not checking on me, he was quietly working on his programming. It was clear he had plenty of responsibilities, yet he never once left me alone. By the evening of the 4th day, my strength began to return. I felt well enough to get out of bed and decided to fetch a glass of water. I moved slowly and tried to make as little noise as possible. But even the softest shuffle seemed to catch his attention. From the hallway, where he was on a work call, I heard him ask with concern, "What are you doing up? Did I wake you?" I shook my head gently. "No, I just wanted to get some water." "Stay there, I will get it for you," Noah said immediately. As if I were made of delicate glass, he helped me back into bed, tucked the blanket around me, and then left the room to fetch the water. I felt a little helpless. But when he returned and handed me the glass, I drank quietly and said, "I really am feeling much better now." He reached out to touch my forehead. "Your temperature is back to normal," he said. Then, with a more serious tone, he added, "But recovery is like pulling on a thread. It takes patience and care. I have already extended your leave for another week. Use the time to rest fully." I wanted to protest, to say I could handle it, but when I looked into his eyes, when I saw the stubble on his cheeks, proof of nights spent tending to me instead of himself, I could not argue. I simply nodded. After sleeping for so many days, I no longer felt tired. Sitting up in bed, I picked up my phone and had just unlocked the screen when a flash of lightning lit up the room. A second later, thunder crashed loudly outside. Before I could react, warm hands gently cupped over my ears. "Do not be afraid," Noah said softly. His voice was low, calm, and reassuring. "I'm not scared," I replied with a small smile, reaching up to pull his hands away. He looked startled, then stepped back quickly. "I was not trying to," he began, flustered. "When it thundered, I thought you might be frightened." "How did you know I'm afraid of thunder?" I asked, genuinely curious. Even Ethan had never known that about me. Noah hesitated. "I heard it from a friend," he said, looking slightly sheepish. "He said a lot of girls are afraid of thunder, so I just assumed." He turned and left the room for a moment, then returned with a glass of warm milk and a small vintage record player. He set them gently on the bedside table. "Listening to music can help calm the nerves," he said. "A better mood might help you recover faster." Soft music began to play, its gentle melody blending with the low hum of the storm outside. Noah picked up his laptop and added, "Since you are awake now, I will stay in the living room to give you some space. If you need anything, just call for me." With that, he stepped out and quietly closed the door behind him. Left alone, I looked around the room. The pink walls glowed softly in the warm light. The music drifted around me, and the milk sat quietly by my side. For the first time in a very long while, I felt completely at peace. The comfort of the room, the gentle lighting, the soothing music, the quiet kindness. eased something inside me. For years, I thought I had overcome my fear of thunderstorms, but now I realized it had never really gone away, it had simply been buried. During my marriage to Ethan, I endured many stormy nights alone. I told myself that fear was childish. I taught myself to stay quiet, to breathe through the thunder, to never cry. Over time, I convinced myself I had grown used to it, that I had become strong. But tonight, I felt calm in a way I had never experienced before. Something deep inside me had softened. I caught my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. There was a faint smile on my face. Barely there, but it was real. Then a cold wave of awareness passed through me, washing away that brief warmth. I reached up and gently patted my cheek, bringing myself back to reality. No, I could not let this happen. No one can be another person's savior. I could not afford to expect anything from anyone. Not anymore. The reason I had once chased Ethan so desperately traced back to something that happened 6 months earlier. It was at a banquet. I had been humiliated in front of everyone. And Ethan, cold, aloof Ethan, had stood up for me. Before I turned 5, my life had been easy, joyful. I was a beloved daughter in a happy home. But after the accident that took my parents, I became quiet, withdrawn. The brightness faded. That night at the banquet, when Ethan defended me, it felt like the first time someone had reached out to the child I used to be, and I mistook it for love. Grandma loved me deeply, but she was growing older, and she had many grandchildren to care for. She could not devote all her attention to me, no matter how much she wanted to, and the things children experience, the teasing, the cruelty, were things adults could never fully understand. Little by little, I lost my friends. Eventually, I stopped wanting to go outside altogether. The banquet I remembered so clearly had been held for the 90th birthday of one of Grandma's oldest and dearest friends, a kind woman who had always been gentle with me when I was little. I had decided to attend the celebration to show my respect, but during the event, someone deliberately spilled wine on me. They laughed and mocked me, calling me the mute. A crowd gathered, not to help, but to watch, amused by my humiliation. Back then, I did not know how to defend myself. All I could do was stand there and silently wish it would end, or that Grandma would suddenly appear and take me away. What I had not expected was for Ethan to walk into the hall and witness the scene. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward and stood up for me. He became the first person outside of my family who had ever defended me in public. That moment stayed with me. I clung to it tightly, holding it as proof that someone could care about me. I poured all my emotional needs into that one act, hoping it would fill the space where security and belonging had once been. That was why, in my previous life, I did not care about the ridicule, or even his coldness. I just kept chasing him, again and again, throwing myself into the fire, hoping he would eventually turn around and choose me. But after years, decades, of a painful, tangled marriage, I finally learned my lesson. No one could rescue me but myself. Searching for comfort in another person was simply walking from one darkness into another. What I had once seen as heroism was, to Ethan, nothing more than a small incident. He had only helped me because of the long-standing relationship between the Sue and Carter families. It had nothing to do with me as a person. I should have thanked him for his kindness. Yes, but I should never have built my entire emotional world around him. And now, with Noah, I reminded myself the same thing. He was kind to me because I was the partner arranged for him. If it had been someone else, he would have treated her with the same courtesy. Without expectations, there would be no disappointment, no pain. I already had my own way of living, one that shielded me from heartache. There was no reason to gamble on something uncertain, not when I had already found a way to keep myself safe. When I had recovered, I told Noah that I planned to move out. He was quiet for a long time before giving me a one-word answer. Okay. I moved into a new apartment, one closer to my workplace. I had inherited enough from my parents and Grandma, so instead of renting, I bought the place. That way, I could decorate it exactly how I liked. Still, every time I walked through the door and saw those soft pink walls, I could not help but feel that something was missing. One evening after work, just as I was about to head home, someone stopped me on the sidewalk. I looked up and saw Ethan standing there. I just heard about your grandmother, he said. I was overseas for a while. Are you doing all right? It has been a while, I replied, surprised for a moment. It had been more than 2 months since Grandma's funeral. I'm fine now, but thank you for asking, I said politely. Something about Ethan felt different. His demeanor was not like the distant, immature Ethan I used to know. His eyes held a calmness that reminded me of the man I had come to understand at the very end of my last life. I looked at him closely, trying to read his expression, but I saw nothing. Maybe I was just imagining it. It's not safe to be out here alone at night, Ethan offered. Let me drive you home. There's no need, I said firmly. I live nearby, just a 10-minute walk. He did not argue, and I was relieved, but he also did not leave. Is there something else? I asked. Looking him in the eye. Can you add me back on WeChat? Ethan asked. His voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. I promise I won't disturb you. I want to stay in touch, even if it's just as friends. I shook my head. That won't be necessary. We're in different lines of work. We probably will not run into each other again, now that Grandma is gone. I don't visit the family home much anymore. I think it's best we go our separate ways. Ethan fell silent, the space between us filled with an uneasy tension. I'm heading home now, I said, turning to leave, but before I could take a single step, Ethan reached out and grabbed my arm. You and Noah, he began, then paused. I know you've moved out, you haven't seen each other in a while. You don't love him, do you? You only chose him to fulfill your grandmother's last wish. He took a breath and added, I could have done that too. I was her grandson. I could have honored her wish. I had no idea what had changed in Ethan during his time abroad, and honestly, I did not care enough to ask. I shook his hand off and turned to leave again. But as I looked up, I saw Noah standing not far away. Our eyes met. In that instant, Noah turned and started to walk away. Noah, I called out after him, my voice cutting through the stillness and stopping him in his tracks. He did not turn around. If you keep walking, I said, half joking but meaning every word, I will make sure to run away every time I see you from now on. Noah stopped in his tracks, frozen in place. Ethan, still standing beside me, spoke again. His voice carried a familiar tone that sent an involuntary chill down my spine. Moo Moo, he said, that old nickname made my skin crawl. Do not call me that, I said sharply. We are not close. I stepped away from him and walked toward Noah. Why did you run away when you saw me? I asked, meeting his eyes directly. Noah looked down, his voice quiet. I did not want you to see me unhappy. I blinked, confused. When did I ever say I did not want to see you? He hesitated before answering. If you did want to see me, then why did you move out of my house? He asked. I thought, maybe it made you uncomfortable being there with me. I had not expected that. It hurt to know he had misunderstood, still staring at the ground. Noah added softly, I know you like Ethan. I did not want to make things harder for you. As he turned to walk away again, I quickly reached out and grabbed his arm. If you take one more step, I said, my voice low but steady, I really will not want to see you again. He stopped instantly, then he spun around, grabbing my arm tightly as if afraid I would slip away. His nervous expression was so serious, so sincere, that I had to work hard not to smile. Clearing my throat, I said, my water is out at home tonight. Can I stay at your place? Noah stared at me, stunned. Is that a problem? I asked, trying to sound casual. No, not at all, he said quickly, then reached for my hand and began leading me toward his house. His pace was so fast I almost had to jog to keep up. Noticing this, he slowed down and looked at me. I do not like Ethan anymore, I said quietly but clearly, and I never will again. There was a long silence before I heard his soft reply, okay. When we arrived at Noah's house, I felt something I had not known I was missing. The porch light was on. The space felt lived in, warm. It felt like someone had been waiting for me to come home. 2 years later, I said yes to Noah's proposal. On our wedding day, something unexpected happened. Right in the middle of the ceremony, Ethan's parents stood up and left abruptly. At the time, I had no idea why. It was not until the banquet had ended that I learned the truth. Ethan had attempted suicide. Thankfully, he was found in time and rushed to the hospital. His mother, heartbroken and desperate, stayed by his side and begged him to let go of that dark thought. She pleaded with everything she had until he finally agreed to try to keep living. 2 weeks later, he was released from the hospital. That very day, Ethan booked a one-way ticket and left the country. He never came back. 5 years after he disappeared, I received a message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." It arrived on the exact same day I had died in my previous life. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.